don't want that here. Basically, they want the Federal Reserve to have this. They want to eliminate other types of cryptocurrency, and eventually, I think, move to a cashless society, and then they would obviously have this. And they're all doing the same thing. We're going to be able to do, they don't have the authority to do this unilaterally, but if they try, we'll have protections here in Florida. And of course, Congress should not ever support anything such as that. So that's just one example. We believe in actually getting ahead of this stuff, and so that's what we're doing. Now, here is an example of something we didn't necessarily think we would be needing to do, but it's something that we have to do. We have a government of laws, it said, not a government of men. And that includes the law being superior to big corporations, even corporations as big and powerful as Walt Disney Company. They are not superior to the laws that are enacted by the people of the state of Florida. And if you remember 2022, we had a special session of the Florida legislature. Commissioner Simpson was the Senate president at the time. Some of these members were there, where we said, this idea of one corporation having its own government in Central Florida is something that is no longer in the best interest of the state of Florida. So we put down the marker that we were going to be going in a different direction, and a lot of people didn't think that would be anything that would even be possible, given how much heft and how much power that this one company had withstood. And so, my mantra was, you're not going to have Disney have its own government in Central Florida. They're going to live under the same laws as everybody else, pay their fair share of taxes, and honor the debts that they've accumulated over these years. And so we then had to, as we were getting into this calendar year, put the finishing touches on, okay, what does that look like? How do you bring that vision into a reality? And there were certain things you could have done. I mean, for example, could have just said, just dissolve the district and let the local governments take it. The problem with that is, like, the local government here in Orange County was very clear. If they had to assume the bonds, they were going to raise people's taxes, and that was totally unacceptable. We're not going to make people in Central Florida pay taxes for Disney's debts. And then we also just weren't sure how they would even manage this. They may just cede back control to Disney. We didn't know. So we felt it was better to put a state control board over this district, be able to ensure accountability, all the things that I outlined, but also make sure that the debts were being paid by the corporation that racked them up. And so that was done. It allowed us to have the state now in charge of this special district with 5 members that were appointed by the governor. And that was done, passed, signed. While that was happening, Disney did basically special deals to circumvent that whole process. And so they controlled the board. So it's basically like a legal fiction. They negotiated with themselves to give themselves the ability to maintain their self-governing status. Now, that's in direct defiance of the will of the people of Florida. I mean, we started on this course in 2022. This was an issue in the election, both for the legislature and for governor in this area. I was very clear where I stood. We were criticized for taking that position. We were criticized by the media, who always said self-government was bad for Disney. They always opposed it. Then, because I was the one that took it out, then they switched and they said that we should support Disney. But that's just their partisanship. But the reality is, this was something that was litigated. This is something that the voters understood. And not only did the legislature come back in ways that vindicated our position, we won big. And, we did better in Central Florida, Republicans done in a long time, including areas that have a lot of employees of Disney, like Osceola County. So the reality is, clearly that's the direction we were going to go. No more self-government. And they just didn't care. I mean, they thought that they could create some type of development agreements that would essentially render everything that we did null and void, and put them in control in perpetuity for this. Well, that's not going to work. That's not going to fly. Now, the agreements themselves have a plethora of legal infirmities that render them void anyways. And I think that the board, our state board that meets again on Wednesday, I think that they will find as such, and I fully expect them to take the board out of those agreements. However, even if that weren't the case, Chapter 163, Section 3241 of Florida statutes provides the legislature with the authority to revoke development agreements in this exact type of instance. And so I've worked with both leaders of the House and Senate. There is a bill that will be put out in the Florida legislature that will make sure that the agreements purported to be entered into by Disney are revoked, and the people's will is established and is upheld. And that is something that's very important. And at the end of the day, we made the decision as a state, as a people, through the medium of our elections, that we would not have one corporation serving as its own government. That's not good government, and it's not something that we want to entertain in Florida any longer. And whatever rationale there was 60 years ago to do that, clearly now we're in a much different era as a state. We've got a lot of competitors that are treated differently, a lot of businesses and individuals treated differently, so we don't want to do that. So we want to make sure that Disney lives under the same laws as everybody else. And some of that has already been underway. Once the state board took over, we began mobilizing state agencies to ensure that Disney's following the same rules. Building inspection, safety, all these other things that they were exempt from when everybody else has to follow. Now, if these are not good laws, then everyone should be exempt. You shouldn't just say one corporation should be exempt. So that's already been done. We're also working with the legislature. We expect the legislature to provide a legislative amendment, a provision. You know, this monorail is exempt. They exempted the monorail from any safety standards or inspections, so they're going to go and make sure that the monorail is subject to oversight, just like everything else would be in the state of Florida. And Commissioner Simpson will talk a little bit more about what the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services do, but they have oversight over amusement park safety, generally speaking, except Disney's been carved out of that over the years. Well, now they're back in the game, so they're going to make sure that that's done. So it's just very important that we have uniform applicability of the laws, and to be able to circumvent this stuff, you know, provides one company with a competitive advantage. We don't think that that's right. We also, so the board is going to meet on Wednesday, and we anticipate that they will be tackling a lot of other issues to ensure that our vision is upheld with respect to this district. You know, one of the things they tried to do was put restrictive covenants on the land that the district owns. So if you look at this whole special district, Walt Disney Corporation obviously owns a lot of it, but the district owns other land. And, you know, quite frankly, I wasn't even thinking about that land. This was not something that was really important one way or another. We just wanted them to live under the same rules, pay the debt, pay the taxes, all that stuff. Oh, but come to think of it, now people are like, well, what should we do with this land? And so, you know, it's like, okay, people have said, you know, maybe have maybe create a state park, maybe try to do more amusement parks. Someone even said, like, maybe you need another state prison. Who knows? I mean, I just think that the possibilities are endless, and so that is now going to be analyzed to see what would make the most sense, and that wasn't necessarily even on the radar. I anticipate the board is also going to look at some of the infrastructure here, like the utilities, and then ask the question: would it be better to sell that utility from the district to maybe a private entity who can operate it more efficiently? Maybe the district would save some money on this and could put that towards paying down the bonds and the debts. So I know that'll be something there. One of the things I said from the very beginning that I know the board is interested in is we've got these first responders, you know, but they've really had no one that they could talk to about any type of grievance procedures or pay. So we think that you want to have pay increases for the first responders here in the district, and I think they can get that done. Also, one of the things that was so frustrating for people over the last few years was, you know, Disney clung to forcing these young kids to wear masks forever. And so I think that the district would be within its right to say that, you know, anyone who's a patron of any business in this district has a right to do it mask-free. You should not be required to do a mask or any type of these medical authoritarian policies. Also, I think it would be something that the board could do to make sure that this district was really leaning in hard against human trafficking. There have been bills in the legislature, and I've signed legislation as governor. What would happen, though, is those bills, as they were going through the process, would sometimes get watered down, largely due to the lobbying heft of Disney, not wanting to have warnings in hotels and stuff. I think it's important that we lean in as hard against this as we can. And so I think they're going to do, we're actually doing more in the legislature. I know the legislature is working on some stuff, which hopefully I'll be able to sign. I really look forward to doing that. But we just have to make it very clear as a state, of course, but then here within this district, that really there's zero tolerance for human trafficking. Another thing I think the board very well may look at is the how much is this property worth? I mean, basically, you had a situation where the company could appraise its own property. I mean, imagine if you could appraise your own property. Would you appraise it too high or too low? Of course, you're going to do it too lower. So in terms of the taxes, so they're going to be able to get that done, and I think get a more honest assessment about that. They also have the ability, when you're looking at paying these debts off, there's about close to $1 billion, I think, in unsecured debt, and we'd like to get that debt paid off as quickly as possible. Of course, it's not going to be paid by taxpayers outside of this district, so you got to figure out how you're going to do that. They can definitely look at the millage rate in terms of the millage that's being applied to property taxes, and taking whatever revenue you're getting and just accelerating that debt payment. Because once that debt's extinguished, it makes it a lot easier to be able to deal with everything. And then finally, what role can they play in ensuring more workforce housing within these properties? I think that it's been a huge issue for so many people throughout the state of Florida. We just did a big bill for the state as a whole, but particularly here, there's been a lot of promises over the years about doing affordable housing for the workforce, and yet very little follow through, and there's various reasons for that, but I think we have an opportunity to look at that. So I think you're going to see a lot of action from the state board's perspective on Wednesday and then in the ensuing weeks, and I think it's all about making sure that the vision is made into a reality where this company is under the law, following the law, paying taxes, and honoring the debts, and not governing itself. And so if we've been able to do that, this is a larger issue than just kind of this particular special district. The larger issue is ultimately who governs in a republic. And I think it's we, the people, under the Constitution. I think that's the only answer. And when you have, entities that kind of step out of that and put themselves above it, I don't think it's healthy, period. And so this is very, very important. And if you look, we have in Florida, I know there's a lot of national economic problems. I mean, we still have inflation. You've got a lot of turmoil potentially on the horizon. But if you look what we've been able to do at the state level, we've gotten the big issues right. I mean, obviously having the state open during COVID, they weren't even allowed to operate in California for like a year. Are you kidding me? And they were operating here. They actually opened way later than we said get in, and they wanted to wait a little longer even in Florida. But I mean, we were very happy to have people up and running. And if you look at our unemployment rate, close to an all-time low, much lower than the nation as a whole. Our GDP growth faster than any other big state. We're the fastest growing state, number one for net in-migration, second lowest per capita state tax burden in America, second lowest per capita state debt burden in America. And in our budget that we're going to do this year, I think we did $1.2 billion in tax relief last year. That was a Florida record. They may do twice that. They may get up to $2.5 billion this year. That's a huge benefit for a lot of folks throughout the state of Florida. And we're also, I had proposed, and I think the legislature is going to adopt, we have very low debt as a state. Our economy's over $1 trillion. Our debt's about $20 billion. But because we have a big surplus, can we make more mileage on that? So we actually are going to launch, probably it'll be in the budget, a accelerated debt repayment program. So we'll be able to pay down the debt even faster as we go forward. And sometimes it's smart to do debt if interest rates are low. You have things you need to do anyways. Sometimes it's better to do that, but it's also great if we could be the lowest per capita debt in the country. What would that say about it? Like, you don't need an income tax. You don't need to tax people. You just need to have a good environment, be a free state, and allow people to do their thing. And that's pretty much what we've done. But that's all that economic success is people operating on a level playing field, not picking winners and losers. And this is an example where winners have been picked in the past, and we think that there should be a level playing field again going forward. So I want to thank the legislature for their quick attention to this matter. When this was first reported, there was a lot of misinformation put out there. We understood that, but we also wanted to make sure we were working with them very tightly and that we were being able to have appropriate legislative response in addition to the response that the control board would do. So now we're going to hear from some other folks. So Senator or Commissioner Simpson, you're up.
Thank you, Governor. I stand here today as the Commissioner of Agriculture, which also oversees the Division of Consumer Services in Florida. I took office 100 days ago. It seems like a year or two ago, but we have made incredible strides to return our focus on farmers and food production. We're fighting to keep foreign enemies from buying our ag lands. The governor's been a big leader on this issue. It's something that we hope to sign that bill later this summer. We are building on our wildlife corridors through the Rural and Family Lands program to keep land in the hands of farmers rather than developers. We are keeping taxes low for farmers so they are not priced out of food production. Living in the free state of Florida starts with living, and you cannot live without farmers and food. But this office does a whole lot more than just fight for our farmers. We also have a significant role in protecting consumers, and I stand here today in support of this legislation that will allow my department to conduct inspections when someone is seriously injured on an amusement ride. Thankfully, it doesn't happen that often in Florida, but when it does, we have a duty to inspect and decide whether a ride can safely reopen. We do that across the board for amusement rides everywhere except large theme parks. Where a person is injured should not determine how the state responds. Everyone should have to play by the same rules. This change proposed by the legislature and the governor makes sense. As a businessman and a farmer, I have endured meaningless bureaucracy and unnecessary government interference. Fighting back is one of the reasons I ran for office. But there is a legitimate role for government in public safety and security. I believe this proposal strikes that important balance. To the governor, the legislature, and the consumers of Florida, we can handle this assignment, and we're ready to take up this task, Governor. Thank you.
Brad.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Commissioner. It's an honor to be here with you guys today this afternoon. I'm going to be brief. As the original bill sponsor of the bill that put this in place, we're here today because the legislature took that action to ensure that all companies were on the same level playing field and had the same rules. No company should be able to build a stadium, a nuclear power plant, or most troubling, have eminent domain and be able to take someone's property without any kind of state oversight. And that's what that bill did. We talk about the legislative process and what we went through. There was a lot of time, a lot of staff time put in this process, a lot of reading done, a lot of people looking into how we make this work. Our number one priority as any elected official is always public safety, and we do that. But we also wanted to ensure, as the governor said all along, that none of the citizens of Osceola or Orange County would ever be responsible for that debt, and we did that. Unlike some of the media that's probably here today that tried to report and say we did not do that, and it was going to happen, and $2,000 on your tax bill a year. Let me look you straight in the camera and say you were wrong. It's not happening. Disney went ahead and tried to thwart those legislative efforts, and as the governor said, we're not going to stand for it. As he said, we're a country and a state guided by the rule of law. Trying to pass an 11-hour deal in the middle of the night, Disney acted in only their favor and not of the people. The legislature is appalled by this action and what they have done. You're going to hear in just a little bit in the days to come the action we're going to take to keep anything further from happening. Thank you all.
Thank you, Governor, for your leadership. It's an honor to be here in the district that I represent, District 45. Let it be known across this great nation that here in the free state of Florida, it is we the people, not woke corporations. When Walt Disney founded this company and brought his beloved theme park to Central Florida, he envisioned the happiest place on earth dedicated to the proposition that children and families deserved a high-quality entertainment. We all love Disney. However, you cannot indoctrinate our children. Instead, they have turned Disney into this corporate PR arm of a small group of extremists who want to indoctrinate our children with radical gender ideologies that have no basis in science, common sense, or basic human decency. They have pushed far-left narratives and lies about our great state, and now they think that the rules don't apply to them. Well, I have news for the woke administration at Disney. That this is not California. This is the free state of Florida. And you do not get... And in Florida, you do not get to indoctrinate our kids or write your own rules. Under the governor's leadership, Florida has the best economy in the country. Unlike cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco, when people come here, they thrive. In fact, 3 of the 5 cities with the lowest unemployment rates in the nation are right here in Florida. The reason for that is simple. Florida is a destination for human flourishing because we treat all corporations equally, and Disney is no exception. It is time for Disney executives to have a sober conversation and retake the company from the radical ideologies that have hijacked it. You are in the business of entertaining children and families. You are not in the business of social re-engineering or promoting radical political ideologies. And if you think you are, we have good news for you. As our great governor has said, Florida is the place where woke goes to die. Thank you.
I don't know how I'm going to follow that. That's pretty awesome. My name is Blaise Ngoli. I'm a state senator. I hate corporate welfare. Absolutely hate corporate welfare. And if you strip everything down and start thinking about this situation, is we had a corporation out there that was basically making their own rules. They were their own government. And I would argue that that is an egregious form of corporate welfare. To the representative's point, eminent domain, building your own nuclear power plant. It's unconscionable that one corporation would hold that much power. So what did we do? We took away that power, returned it to the people, and put everyone on a level playing field. Because the Disney Corporation, people who reside in this district, had quite simply an unfair advantage over their competitors. That is unfair. It's unfair to the other corporations. It's unfair to the legislature. It's unfair to the taxpayers. I know this governor, and I know this governor well. So I have a couple words for Disney. You are not going to win this fight. This governor will. And one word of advice to Disney Corporation going forward. Just let it go. Let it go. That's it. Thank you, Governor.
We anticipate legislative action on this probably maybe next week or so. What do you think? Probably next week. So it's good, and I think the board will also just say that there's legal problems and we'll get out of the agreement. But when you have a statutory scheme that contemplates something like this, and the legislature is speaking, that really is I think a strong 1-2 punch, and it just shows that we're going to continue to go with the rule of law, and we're not going to allow self-governing for any one big corporation. And look, like I said, we weren't planning on having to come back to do any legislation. We thought implement the vision. You're basically on a level playing field. Yes, a lot of goodies are removed, but it is what it is. And so, here we are, and we're just going to have to, keep fighting back, and we will continue to do it because there's a larger principle at stake than just about, this company and everything. It's ultimately, we are a government of laws, not a government of individual men or even a government of woke corporations based in California. All right. Any questions? Yes, sir. I think it's going to be, and this is a legislative question, but I think what the legislature is going to do is apply that to special districts. Yep.
Governor, can you tell me, are you surprised that former President Trump lined up 9 Senate Republicans?
Look, this is a big announcement. Honestly, you're asking me about political process. Why don't we focus on this issue at hand? Yes, sir.
Back to Ag and Consumer Services, it sounded like you were saying it would be injuries. You'd be allowed to come in and do the inspections, which currently are prohibited under that MOU. Under the proposed legislation, would Disney still be conducting its own inspections of rides along with Universal, SeaWorld, and Legoland?
No, I don't think so. I think what it's going to be, and you talk to the legislature because this is, I don't even know that the draft is final on this particular thing, but I think what it is that these inspections will be required for amusement parks within special districts. And as you know, those parks are not necessarily within special districts. So I think it's going to be focused on that, is my understanding. Yes, sir.
Can you give us the specifics of the legal problems with the agreements? And is the board going to be voting on Wednesday to rescind those agreements?
The second part of your question is yes. There's a variety of them, and you can talk to some of the lawyers, but one of the infirmities is there's certain procedures you have to go through when you do something like that, and that involves providing notice to anybody who's affected property owner in the area, and not everything was complied with. Therefore, that renders it defective. There's also other issues about self-dealing. When you have, this is not an arm's length transaction. And there's an Inspector General investigation going on, and if there's any type of criminal fraud, that will be pursued. So we had that launched last week, and so that's been going on, and they'll probably get some answers to how did this happen. But I think what you'll find is that this is basically a sham agreement, that this was just a corporation doing an agreement for itself without any counterparty effectively. And I think that's pretty clear. Also, if you look what they tried to do, they tried to do the development agreement. That's obviously revocable. They also tried to add restrictive covenants to the district's land, using the land that's owned by the district. There was no consideration given for that, and you can't have a contract without adequate consideration. So, and I think there's probably others. I think they'll probably have a legal briefing on that at their meeting on Wednesday, so stay tuned. But I highly, highly anticipate that they will find, the board will find that it is not a valid agreement. We'll get out of it. And that probably is enough right then and there, but you could have potential litigation over those legal questions. I think when the beauty of the legislature getting involved is that they're going to come in and they are now going to be in a situation where they can just pursuant to Florida statute in a situation that was envisioned by this to basically say, you know what, no, this development agreement's revoked. And that's what's going to be the law in the state of Florida. So I think that's a good thing. Yes, sir.
Governor, are you worried that potential legislative action would violate any contract clause out there? And then how does this benefit Florida taxpayers?
No, it doesn't violate any contracts clause, because this was when you enter into a contract, you're entering into a contract against the background of all the existing law. So this provision was on the books. Anytime you do a development agreement, you know you're subject to this and that there could be revocation under certain circumstances. And this is exactly the type of circumstance that the law contemplates. So it is not abridging a contract when you have something like this. And how does it help Florida taxpayers? Well, this whole arrangement protects Florida taxpayers, because if we would have sent it to the local government, they were going to use the assumption of the bonds as a reason to raise taxes on people. There's all kinds of copy spilled about this. People were saying, oh, you're going to have thousands of dollars more in tax. And I said it wouldn't happen. But then lo and behold, what did we do? We went this direction to protect all those folks from having to do. Now, I do think when they do the whole millage rate, when they look at that, when they look at the value of the property, to me, it's if you're undervaluing property, then that means you're not paying your fair share right there. I mean, you get your property assessed by a third party. You don't get to assess your own property for the purposes of the taxes. I mean, imagine if you could do that. I mean, homestead, you're kind of protected in Florida from too much going up, but people that don't have that, I mean, the property values have gone up significantly, particularly over the last 4 or 5 years. And that's just the nature of it. And they would never be able to just do their own properties like that. So I think it's protecting taxpayers in Central Florida. I think we're going to have a pathway to get these bonds extinguished. And, we'll see, like, if they end up selling off the utility, I mean, they're going to have to look to see what goes into that. But that could end up making the district money, depending on what everything is about. So, okay. So what we were referencing is not necessarily that the legislature would impose those taxes, but that they would arm the district with the ability, because actually the old district did have the authority to do toll roads. We took it out in the February legislation, but then we thought, you know what, maybe you do. But then I told myself, I said, well, I wouldn't apply that to Florida residents. But then if you don't apply it to Florida residents, can you do it? So we just and the legislature was kind of cool to the idea of giving them that. But as we research the powers that the district has, we absolutely are confident that they have enough wherewithal to be able to do what they need to do to ensure that there's adequate revenue to be able to extinguish the debt that has been accumulated over all these years. So I think it's a combination. I think the legislature didn't really, think it would make sense. And then as we look more deeply, we're like, you know what, they do have the tools. So it wasn't that they were going to oppose a tax. It was just they were going to give the district the ability to levy. But I don't think it's necessary as we look through this. And I think that what the board does over the next few weeks will make that very, very clear. All right, everyone, stay tuned. We got more coming up, so be ready.
See you on the water.